So the only way to scale gold in terms of transaction throughput for a globalizing society was via the central bank. And that is because gold is physical. So that's the attack vector on gold effectively. There's another element here too, that because gold is physical, you can violently confiscate gold, right? When Germany, I think when they invaded Poland, the first place they went was the central bank, right? They go straight to the central bank, raid their gold. Bitcoin's different in that it doesn't, because it's dematerialized and honestly perfected the economic properties that we seek in money, we don't need to centrally custody Bitcoin to scale it for the world. And that really makes all the difference. So the fact that people have an option to take physical delivery of Bitcoin, which is to say you can take possession of your own private keys anytime, anywhere, 24/7, without anyone's permission. This is the option that citizens need to hold government and other institutions in check. When you could go to the bank and convert your banknote or your warehouse receipt into gold, you could have effectively cast a vote of no confidence on the bank or on the government or whatever. You just say, I don't trust what's going on here. I don't trust the individuals involved or the institutions involved. I want to take possession of this bearer asset gold, such that I have no counterparty risk with any of these people or institutions that I don't trust. Problem is, they always suspend convertibility. Once anything gets hairy, that's the first thing you suspend to basically put banks onto this fiat standard. With Bitcoin, it's much harder to stop convertibility. And convertibility is not even necessary if you're not using a centralized custodian. If you're using a self-custody model or a multi-signature custody model, you don't need convertibility at all. You have full sovereignty over your money, which forces institutions to be more accountable to the preferences of their customers. Governments are very effective at regulating centralized institutions, which is why Bitcoin was architected to be decentralized. And they can, I think, slow down the progress of Bitcoin. You can hurt Bitcoin businesses. You can push Bitcoin business offshore into other friendlier jurisdictions and whatnot. But the key point here is that no matter what you do legally, no matter what opinion you render or enforce via fiat, you'll never change the consensus rules of Bitcoin. You'll never change the fact that there's a certain block size. It's created at an average once every 10 minutes, block of transactions, and it adheres to a supply cap of 21 million. There's no decree, there's no law, there's no regulation that can change any of that. So ultimately, what's that old saying? There's something about liars have to censor, whereas truth persuades. Bitcoin is just kind of the truth of money that's persuading people to use it. It's incentivizing people to use it. There's no enforcement mechanism for Bitcoin. There's no one's putting a gun to your head, proverbial or literal, and telling you to use Bitcoin. It's completely completely according to the self-interest of the market actor involved. Well, the question really cuts both ways. You could say, all right, there's one version of the world where all the governments wake up and say, you know what, this fiat experiment was crazy. We need to go back to a hard money standard. We need fixed money supplies. Let's all be fiscally responsible. We're going to need a ton of austerity to shake off all this debt. Let's all do that. And we're all coordinated and we're all, walking the line. There's another version of the world that I think is much more likely, is that governments are a business, right? They want to grow. And to grow, they need to expand revenues. And for governments, revenues are taxation, inflation and taxation. Inflation is another form of taxation. So what we see historically and what we see sort of rationalistically looking at the business model of government is that it needs to expand taxation and inflation over time to grow as a business. If that is the path that the world continues to go down, that is the path we're going down today, then that's just creating more and more demand for unstoppable, uninflatable, unconfiscatable money. Now, your point's taken too, that you said Bitcoin has been seized, can be seized. Of course it can. So can physical gold, right? Anything that a human can possess can in theory be seized. But with Bitcoin, we do have these very interesting ultra high security custody schemas that are not possible with any other asset. I mentioned multi-sig earlier. I think multi-sig is it's the best of both worlds. You get self-sovereignty over your asset, but you also get redundancy such that you're not a single point of failure. We talk about this a lot in Bitcoin circles because, Bitcoiners are very adversarial thinking. That's kind of in the ethos of the cypherpunk tradition. What's funny about it though is you ask yourself this question and you research and you study for thousands of hours, and the best answer we've come up with so far is a Black Swan event. There's just something which by definition is an unknown, right? I can't even tell you what it would be because then it wouldn't be a Black Swan. This could be something in the protocol layer. We could break elliptic curve cryptography. There could be some cosmological event, maybe that did an electromagnetic pulse and wiped out everything electronic in the world for a long period of time. All of these things are real threats. The number one known unknown is, in my opinion, just the response of the state. How hard are they going to come down on this thing? We saw Executive Order 6102 back in the 30s, where they outlawed the private ownership of gold. That was done under threat of imprisonment and fine, but the actual enforcement tended to be focused on centralized custodians. So they weren't going door to door and telling people to give them gold. They were just going to where people custodied their gold and confiscating it. All of these enforcement measures are much more difficult on a Bitcoin standard. So what would cause me to change the tune that I'm singing about Bitcoin? It would have to be the realization of some type of Black Swan that just radically depressed the hash rate. The hash rate is, how much energy and capital is being allocated towards Bitcoin production and security, which I would expect that to be reflected in price. And, I don't know, it would take a heck of a beating because right now Bitcoin is far and away the most secure computing network in human history. We saw China outlaw Bitcoin mining a few months ago. The hash rate took a huge drop, 40%, and it's since over its original high point where it was before the China mining ban. So Bitcoin mining has proven itself to be extremely formless in a way. It's an amorphous target because if you try to clamp down on these mining operations, these are just modular miners, right? They just get boxed up, shipped to another jurisdiction and plugged back in. That's exactly what we saw with the China mining ban. So if the largest, most violent and centralized police state in the world can't stop Bitcoin mining, I'm not confident any other government can. If you're a large established enterprise and your business model is being threatened by some technological disruption or some new competitor, there's a number of ways to respond. But if the competitor is small enough, the easiest way to respond is to just buy equity or buy equity in the competitor or buy the competitor outright. And we see, a lot of companies do this today. There's, internet companies do this. Facebook's done a lot of this. They bought Instagram, they bought WhatsApp, et cetera. So if you're a central bank and you determine that any of this Bitcoin thesis is even marginally possible, like even just 1% chance, for instance, of Bitcoin succeeding in the way that Bitcoin maximalists envision it, then the calculus for a central bank is quite straightforward. It's like, okay, there's a 1 in 100 chance of this thing destroying my business model. What can I do to hedge myself? What can I do to hedge my business model against its success? And a very straightforward, pragmatic answer would be just allocate 1% of your assets into Bitcoin as an insurance policy against its success. So this doesn't require central banks, having some ideological flip about Bitcoin or deciding it's important, or they can completely hate it and despise it on every level.
You buy Bitcoin or sats every single day.
I do.
Is there a level that the Bitcoin price breaks, a resistance level that it breaks that would have you a little bit worried?
The most shaken I've ever been was in March 2020, actually. And wasn't, the Bitcoin price, I think definitely has an effect on you. But my broader concern was that the world was just going to have some type of Spanish flu event. This was back when COVID was announced in March 2020. And then I thought that perhaps we'd just have bigger fish to fry than money for a while. But turns out, COVID's just a flu, and it's been used as an excuse to do everything, and then some at the state level. So no, there's not a price point I think that particularly would shake me out of my Bitcoin position. Honestly, at this point, I'm like so skin and soul in the game that I think I'm just riding this thing all the way, no matter where it goes. But it's a strange perception because I may sound like some type of cultist or something saying that, but I actually feel very pragmatic in my position. My liquid net worth, my liquid savings, I keep in Bitcoin. And at this point in history where people are tripping over themselves to impose their opinion onto one another, and politics has become such an emphasis in our individual and collective identity, I think the smartest move imaginable is to hold the money that is completely immune to all those opinions, immune to all the politics. And to your point about certainty earlier, it's like it's pretty evident the world's becoming increasingly uncertain amid all this nonsense, this post-COVID regulatory mass psychosis. Bitcoin, like fixed money at 21 million, works 24/7. It's been doing exactly what it said it would do, what Satoshi said it would do perfectly for 13 years. Like, it's the most certain asset in the world, in my opinion. Like, the uncertainty of Bitcoin is like that it's only 13 years old. But if you limit your view to its life, it's the most certain asset we've ever had. So I feel a great deal of peace of mind holding the most certain asset the world's ever had amid conditions of the greatest uncertainty I've seen in my lifetime, at least.